What is up, Dynasty Leaguers? Welcome into another episode of Drafting Lessons, the DLF TV show where I grab a guest every single week and we run through a Dynasty startup or Dynasty rookie mock drafts back in the spring. So today we're going to continue to do Dynasty Superflex startups, 10 rounds, all that fun stuff. And today I've brought on, I think a person who's going to very uniquely talk about a strategy that I wouldn't say is very different, but it's very contrarian to, I think, what the norm kind of is in a dynasty landscape and a dynasty, draft and league. So, Jordan McNamara, Jordan, how's it going, man? I had you on for rookie drafts, but I think we're going to talk more in your specialty here in dynasty startup drafts.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I like coming back. I love being a guest. It's a real honor. This is going to be great because it'll be an implementation of some of the stuff from the analytics of Dynasty in 2020. So I did a lot of work on some of the theory of behind startup Superflex drafts. So this will be a good test of it. So I'm excited.
Sweet, yeah. So Jordan, I mean the analytics of Dynasty, it's like I said, it's not unique, but it's contrarian and it's kind of different in terms of overall like roster construction and stuff like that for a dynasty league, and pinpointing and identifying certain player skill sets and player types as opposed to just, the players themselves. Right. So before we dive into this mock draft, I want to ask you, what is your overall Superflex startup draft strategy? Do you try to leave with a certain number of X positions? Are you, targeting certain positions early, late? What is your overall feel going into a dynasty startup draft?
So I guess for me, I come at it from a couple of. I think we talked about this in the prior show. I come at it from my goal is to play a lean and mean at wide receiver. Mm-hmm. That's the primary object. That's, I guess, one of the 2 or 3 primary objectives. The next one is to play a volume game at running back. And so blending those two is, I think, a different formula each year. And the other is to not miss early at quarterback. And one thing I found in my research is, the more we get into, the more research I get into in terms of quarterbacks, the miss rate is huge on guys that haven't done it yet. So avoiding those landmines. Again, sometimes it's not even like, I don't think I can pick players particularly, distinguish between Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones any better than the market can. But I do think in terms of when you look at their profiles, I do think they have starkly different trajectories and hit rates and those sorts of things. And so I look more at those things, trying to avoid the danger landmines, and really focus on that, because I think at quarterback in particular, hitting is a lot more important than drafting for super high upside, because so much of the upside that happens is just variance. Mm-hmm. Right. So, that's a lot of it. Now, it's great when you have the elite guy, but picking it year to year is very, very difficult. So that's really my strategy, I guess, and I try and blend the two of those together. Sometimes tight end takes a little bit of a beating. I think I can get tight end a little bit later historically than I can. And I think this year in particular with a handful of guys a little bit later on. So that's generally how I try to blend those together.
Sweet. Yeah. So I'm very interested to see how this kind of comes together in terms of this mock draft. So we are going to be doing a Superflex mock draft for the computer, and for the algorithm's sake, we have it as 2 quarterback, but it is Superflex. 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, and 2 bench spots. That gets us to 10 rounds. And we're going to be drafting out of the 1.01. So I feel like that kind of takes you out of your comfort zone a little bit in terms of, we're not trading in this, in a typical dynasty startup, you'd probably want to be moving around, grabbing different guys and stuff that you see that kind of fit your construction. But just for the sake of this, we're going to be doing it out of the 1.01. And I think it's going to be a really interesting and super informative mock draft. So we're just going to get right into it. I'm going to hit this here button, and we're going to be on the clock when I come out the other side. I don't know why it took forever to load in that time, but we're here. So, so 1.01, Jordan, you have your pick of the draft. Really, I'm just very curious on where we're going to go here, because I feel like there's a couple of different routes, two of which are pretty normal, and I would say, chalky, but I'm just interested to see where you decide to go here.
Yeah, so I've thought a lot about this one. I haven't been forced to make this pick, but I don't necessarily think there's a wrong decision unless you take Lamar Jackson. I think that's a wrong decision. But of the other three guys that you would take is Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, or Patrick Mahomes. I don't necessarily think there's a wrong answer, but I think right from the jump, you have to understand what your roster construction is going to be. Right. So what that offers you in terms of the pick that you make, how does that direct the rest of the draft? For a lot of reasons, I think Patrick Mahomes at 101 is fascinating because you can do a lot of different things at quarterback. You can wait forever on quarterback 2 if you chose. You can double down on it and have a 2+ win over replacement type quarterback position pretty easily if you sort of double down on the first couple of rounds. Him and another maybe top 10 guy, something like that. So I think that's really interesting. But again, you can wait. I think you can play that second and third spot a little bit differently. And pre Cam Newton signing, I thought it was really fascinating to try and take Mahomes, wait on a veteran guy, and then stack Winston and Newton. Right, like that would be the strategy. Basically, drafting out of the 101. It's probably not as possible now because Cam's value is going to go up, but those things are inherently unique to Patrick Mahomes. He's essentially like a 3 in basketball. He's the great equalizer, right? I mean, he can do, if you pour in 15 threes in a game, you're probably going to win. Like he has that ability in terms of roster construction and game construction, all those things. So for me, it's Patrick Mahomes, but it's a personal preference of those things. I will say, if you look at quarterbacks versus running backs in the first round of Superflex drafts, going back to when we have data, which was 2014, over the first 3 years, you'll expect close to 2 wins over replacement more out of the quarterback than the running backs. So that is also a historical advantage you have there, going quarterback over running back. Although historically, I tend to wait on, this is unique to Patrick Mahomes at 101. Historically, I would wait to 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round to start hitting quarterback.
Interesting. So, I mean, I love everything that you said there, and I feel like a lot of people are probably in the same camp in terms of it being Patrick Mahomes, and if not, Christian McCaffrey, who did go 102 here. What I really wanted to ask was, I mean, you said it like kind of at the beginning, and I think to you said it so much to yourself and maybe to others as well too, that it just kind of is an afterthought to you. But to me, it was really interesting. You said Lamar Jackson was not the right choice. So I just kind of, what's the mindset behind that? Because I feel like a lot of people as well, if it's not Pat Mahomes, it's not Christian McCaffrey, it's not Saquon Barkley they're picking, it's Lamar Jackson after last season. So why don't you kind of explain that a little bit more in terms of why he would not be the right choice at 101?
Yeah, so for me, I don't even have Lamar Jackson as my quarterback 2 in Dynasty. That's Dak Prescott for me. And a lot of it is just, and actually, Lamar Jackson's my quarterback 4. I have Deshaun Watson ahead of him too. And it's entirely has to do with variance, right? And sort of what we talked about earlier is quarterback 1 seasons happen, right? Definitionally they happen, but what they are historically has been outliers, right? And so what you'll see is huge touchdown rates. I mean, 7% plus touchdown rates. That's 2 standard deviations outside the average. You're talking top 2 to 3% outcome in terms of those rates, and they're not sticky year over year, right? So what you'll see is you get these huge upticks, and I wrote about this in the Analytics Dynasty in the 2020 edition. And then what you're doing is paying for that I would bet a lot on the fact that he's going to regress this year in terms of all those rate things. Does that mean he can't be the same scorer? Doesn't necessarily mean that, but that's a ton of risk, right? Unless his volume goes way up in terms of passing, right? Do we expect him to rush for 1,000 yards again? No quarterback's ever done that twice in a row, And so you look at all these things, right? Is he different? Yes, he is, but it's based on, it's not, his value isn't based on the fact he was different. His value is based on the fact that he had a hyper efficient and unrepeatable 2019 season. It was a great season. He deserved everything he got, but we're playing going forward, I don't get points for what he did last year. I get points for what he does in the future. And so based on all of that, I think, if you just took their touchdown rates and flipped them, right? Dak Prescott finished, I think, about 65, 70 points behind Lamar Jackson. If you flip their touchdown rates, Dak Prescott outscores him by 200 points, right? That's yeah. And so, and for me, Prescott, I sort of had Prescott at 2 since February, right? That was has always been my thought. And people sort of thought it was shock jockey or hot takey or whatever. It wasn't. It's all based on that. And what team led the NFL in total yards last year? It was Dallas. No one remembers that. So they did what? Took away one of their least efficient receivers and replaced him with CeeDee Lamb, right? So in terms of Jason Witten, so you're only supercharging that offense. So I have Dak ahead of Lamar Jackson. I also have Deshaun Watson ahead of Lamar Jackson.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. So, I'm with you in terms of Lamar Jackson. I've been saying it, ever since the end of the 2019 season that Lamar is going to regress. A lot of people have also been saying that as well, too. And it's really, it's not that I don't believe that he can, still be the QB1 overall. I think he definitely has that, especially with his rushing upside. Like even if he rushes for 900 yards, which I think is still very much within the range of outcomes, just because of how much he runs, then I still see, that ceiling. But the combination in terms of 36 touchdowns on 400 attempts, plus an additional almost 1,100 yards rushing and like 7 rushing touchdowns, like that's never going to happen again, ever. Like both of those things is never going to happen. He had we might have just seen Lamar Jackson's best season of his career in only his second year and his first full year starting. So I think that's super interesting.
And history bears that out too, right? And the guys that get to QB1, right? I did a whole study on them in the book. Like it was fascinating because I wanted to know. I sort of had a hypothesis and just wanted to know if I was wrong. But that's a career year, and if you look at what happens to them afterwards and sort of the difference in terms of like yards per attempt and touchdown rate and all of those stats, right, that go into it, they drag their career average way up, right? And so when you take out that player's career average, that player's QB1 finish from their career average, right, that shows you more what the regression number is. That's a pretty big difference, right? And so that's not to say that Lamar Jackson wasn't good last year. It's to say going forward, what's safe. And I want to take very little risk early. And so, I know what Dak Prescott does in a luck neutral year and a non hyper efficient high variance year. I know what Deshaun Watson does. I'm not sure what Lamar Jackson does, So, and I think people, if you're betting on him as a top 4 pick, or you're putting him in that, you're betting on a top 5 to 10% outcome. And having that happen again, there's a lot of things that can go wrong in that. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm all aboard on that logic and that line of thinking. So we're just gonna move on down here. We're on the clock now, 2:12 and the 3.01 here, 2 picks in a row at the turn after Pat Mahomes. The other 23 picks went McCaffrey, Saquon, Thomas, Kamara, Zeke, Cook, Hopkins, Lamar, and Deshaun Watson, Devontae Adams, and Nick Chubb. That rounded out the first round. And then in the second round, it went Kyler Murray, Joe Mixon, Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Dak Prescott, Josh Jacobs, DJ Moore, Julio Jones, Jonathan Taylor, and Derrick Henry as the first 11 picks off the board in the second round. So at the 212, 3.01, the overall players list that we're looking at, quarterbacks, it's Russell Wilson, Josh Allen, Carson Wentz, Baker Mayfield, Joe Burrow, Tua as the top guys there. At running back, it is frozen computer.
I saw Miles Sanders in there.
Yeah, Clyde was in there too. There you go. Clyde, Miles Sanders, JK, DeAndre Swift, Eckler, Aaron Jones, and then wide receiver Juju, Amari, AJ Brown, Kenny Galladay, OBJ, DK, Ridley, and then all of the tight ends are still on the board as well too here. So 2 picks in a row. You can go one by one. You can make both and then talk about both. However you want to attack this one, Jordan.
Yeah. So I think Russell Wilson would be interesting here just in terms of roster construction. I'm not going to do that because I think I can address quarterback later on, especially how good my one is. So it comes down to really, Kittle, I think is appropriate here. But again, I think I can get tight end later. It's not going to have the same upside, but I think I can address it later. So it's going to come down to running back and wide receiver for me here. I think the best running back on the board for me is Miles Sanders. So I'm going to go him as I'll take him at the 212. I'm surprised Mike Evans is off the board this early. It's a pretty rare outcome in terms of the real draft numbers that I've been taking. He's been falling later and later. But I'll take Amari Cooper to go with Miles Sanders here. I like Juju, and they're probably in a tier for me. I just think there's a little bit less uncertainty. I have a little bit more certainty about Amari Cooper right now than Juju. In terms of, I think Amari Cooper has proven and demonstrated that he can be a wide receiver 1. I really like Juju, but he probably hasn't done that yet. So, all the questions about Ben and all of those things. So I'll go with Amari Cooper. I think it's really, really safe. And that's my 2-3 turn.
Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think the Miles Sanders pick makes a whole lot of sense there, especially given, all of the running backs that go off the board here. These mock drafts really like to favor going RB heavy kind of throughout the whole entire draft. So, and we'll see that later on too, when a lot of like backup running backs are being taken over guys like, Jalen Reagor or Jarvis Landry and stuff like that. We'll see that here at the end. But so I like the Miles Sanders pick. I don't really think there's much to talk about there. I was interested because I know how much you're on Mike Evans. You talked about him pretty recently on your Analytics of Dynasty podcast. So I was wondering if we were going to have the opportunity to see you take Mike Evans. So when I saw him and I read him, I was like, oh, there you go. But yeah, that is pretty early for him. In terms of, early second round, I think a lot of people are down on him because of the whole Brady situation and all that stuff. So, but Amari, I like that pick a lot over the other guys as well too. Juju would have been the other guy, and Kenny Galladay would have been interesting for me personally there as well too. But I can't hate on the Amari pick. And overall, my only question on him is, you said that he's safe, but I feel like a lot of people are when they think of Amari Cooper, they think of those weeks where he just kind of disappears. And I know you're not a consistency guy. So
those don't matter.
so yeah, why don't you just kind of address that real quick in terms of why Amari is safe, even though a lot of people are going to look at, his game logs and they're going to be like, man, he had like 2 weeks in the last like half of the season last year when he just completely didn't do anything.
Yeah, just real quick on Mike Evans. I just can't read your screen. What number is that? 204, 205, something like that?
It's 204. Godwin went 204 or 204. Mike Evans went 205 back to back.
Okay, so we're talking 17 overall. In the 140 drafts I've tracked so far this year, Mike Evans hasn't gone earlier than 20. So wow. That's a notable and he is 36 overall in those drafts. So or excuse me, he's 36 overall post draft. He's 34.2 for the entire season. So that's really, really early on Mike Evans. I do think he's a foundational player at the 2-3 turn this year. In terms of and to your question, in terms of Amari Cooper, variance week to week doesn't really matter. And I'm looking at this more and more. People didn't. I laid out my work pretty well, I thought, in Analytics Dynasty 2020 about why variance doesn't hurt you in terms of week to week stuff. And again, if you get, I was talking about this recently, and I don't, might have even been when a discussion we were having. But if you just told me last year that that you could have 8 top 24 weeks in terms of scoring during the season, right? 8 of your weeks were basically a wide receiver 2 week or better. What would the worst person that did that, what would they finish? Well, there was 13 guys that did it. The worst one to finish, wide receiver 15. Right. So when we talk about variance and we talk about high, there's only 2 guys that cracked that tier. So when we talk about variance, I think we really need to keep it in perspective about what we're talking about. And if you get a 50-50 wide receiver, like, cash that, right? Because that's really good in terms of historical, and that's not just a last year thing. That's a historic thing. I mean, Brandon Cooks is probably the greatest example in recent memory of a guy that people have said, "Oh, he's boom bust," when in reality he was at 50. He was at 50% and was basically for 4 straight years a wide receiver 11 to wide receiver 15 finisher. Right? He is the poster boy for the fact that boom bust is a horrible narrative. So I don't really care about the week to week stuff. I'm sort of a set it and forget it. And in the aggregate, it's going to work out over the course of the season. I'm more looking for the year-to-year consistency at wide receiver. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit different of a conversation at running back. I think you can exploit the boom bust a little bit better at running back, but I don't really think you can predict it all that well. And a lot of it is just tight end variant, or it's just touchdown variance, right? Again, okay, so you're going to try and predict which week he has a touchdown, which week he doesn't, right? That's fluky. If he stacks 2 together, he's a great play, so that's really not, those things work themselves out, especially over the course of a 10, 12 man starting roster and, 16 or 13 weeks in a regular season, 16 weeks in a full season. Those things work themselves out. I don't really, and I'm looking more in the 2020, in my future endeavor, my 2021 analytics at Dynasty. I'm looking at the margin of victory and some of those sorts of things. And I think that would really, the margin of victory is going to surprise people in terms of how not close games are decided.
So, consistency has been something that I've been listening to you a lot more, and has really been something that I've been trying to not weigh as much. Like Brandon Cooks, like you said, was the stereotypical and awesome example of the boom bust narrative, and he was actually the guy that got me interested in the terms of consistency, like who are actually consistent players and how that can help you and stuff. Because I remember that 1 week with the Saints where he literally played the whole game and didn't even get a target. And I was like, that is not good. That can't help you. And I feel like Amari has that kind of same floor of just kind of being out there and not doing anything. But, like you said, and the week to week variance is such a small sample size that over time, whenever players do hit, like you said, 8 top 24 weeks in a whole entire season, like that is going to massively change the outcome of your season, as opposed to players who are not doing that, and I think that's right. That really puts that into perspective, that you said that, 13 of the top 15 wide receivers last year did that. Like they had 8 or more, and like Michael Thomas, obviously,
and those are the only ones. That's the funny part of it's the opposite side of it, right? Which is there was only 13, right? And there was 13 that were basically a coin flip or better, and they were the top 13 out of top 15, right? I mean, that's for people that say that. I mean, and the other thing too is you talk about, we talk about guys like Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams and these types, right? Like the year that Devontae Adams did that, I think would he have like nothing worse than like 10 points, right?
Yeah.
Those are cyborgs, right? Those don't happen, right? Like to grade anyone on a scale of Michael Thomas last year is just not fair. And largely it was because of targets.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, when you get that many targets, you're just the odds that you're going to do it are the odds that you're going to be variant from week to week are pretty low because you just have so much opportunity, right?
Right.
So you're going to have a really high floor in a week. So it's more of a different factor, and to expect anyone on that level to expect anyone to produce on that level, including Michael Thomas again, is just asking a lot. And so appreciating that 50% really, really is excellent.
Mm-hmm. Who are the two wide receivers who finished in the top 15 but didn't do that? Do you have that off the?
I don't. I think one of them was Mike Evans.
Okay.
And I think I'm almost certain one of them was Mike Evans. I can look up the other one. I don't have it open. But I can check on that. I'm almost certain Mike Evans is one of them.
I think he would make sense because he did get hurt, so he missed a few weeks. And then also was extremely high. It was, he ping ponged pretty hard. But so yeah, do you find it?
I didn't. I haven't found it yet. I'll check.
Okay, I'll read off the board. I'll read off the board here, and we'll see if you can find that. I was just curious. So the rest of the third, fourth round, it went Russell Wilson, George Kittle, Leonard Fournette, Josh Allen, Odell Beckham Jr., Juju, Aaron Jones, A.J. Brown, Carson Wentz, Kenny Golladay, Baker Mayfield to round out the third. And then the first 11 picks were Courtland Sutton, Austin Eckler, Travis Kelce, DeAndre Swift, Melvin Gordon, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp, Joe Burrow, David Montgomery, DK Metcalf, and Stephon Diggs. So we're here at the 4-5 turn. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still there. That which always leads me to question the overall accuracy of this, but I just like talking about players and strategy. So that's interesting. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire is there, J.K. Dobbins, Calvin Ridley, Allen Robinson, C.D. Lamb, Cam Akers, Kenyon Drake, Jerry Jeudy. Tua is there for quarterbacks, DJ Chark, Terry McLaurin, Mark Andrews is the best tight end available, Matt Ryan, Debo, Robert Woods, Gurley, Daniel Jones, a whole bunch of all these guys here in what seems to be a pretty flat tier. So at the 4-5 turn here, same as previously, to add to Pat Mahomes, Miles Sanders, and Amari Cooper. What are we looking to do here, Jordan?
Yes, this one's interesting. I'm not a huge Clyde Edwards-Helaire fan, so I probably I never was faced with this decision, but I would have taken. I did have Dobbins and Akers above him on my board, on my rookie board. I was never forced into that situation because Edwards-Helaire always went beforehand, or I took Jonathan Taylor and it didn't really matter. So this is an interesting one. I'll say, I think this one's interesting from the perspective of I could do a couple of different things. Mm-hmm. If Allen Robinson was gone, I'd probably stack two rookie running backs here. And just sort of take the 21-year-old running back, profiles. But I just love Allen Robinson too much at this particular point. I think he's one of the better values in all of Dynasty right now. Yep. So I'll take Allen Robinson here. The other ones, this one's interesting again because I haven't had to do over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. From a value perspective. This is an interesting conundrum, right? Because from a value perspective, you should take Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that the theory on that is listen, you're taking someone at the cheapest that you're ever going to get them, right? You should probably do that. The funny part is that if you're doing that with the idea to trade them, 11 other owners just told you that they didn't think he was a top 48 play, right? So that's an interesting, right? So again, you're playing against a computer. It's tough to sort of do that negotiation. But as a strategy tip, I would say if someone's falling and you're going to say, hey, I'll just trade him, right? 48 other picks were just made and he wasn't one of them. Sort of where the league feels on him. I can't let the value fall, even though I would probably in a rookie draft setting pass on him. I can't let the value fall. I'll take Clyde Edwards-Helaire here.
I was wondering what you would do, because I was like you said, I'm staring at Clyde and JK, and I'm like, how do you pass on both of those guys there? But no, I love the Allen Robinson pick. I don't really think we need to go into that one because that, holy crap. A-Rob in like at the 4 or 5 turn is fantastic. And truly the last real alpha wide receiver, in really any dynasty league, I think, as well too. And when you talk about how much you love Mike Evans, like A-Rob has to be up there as well too, just in terms of he's done it before with terrible quarterbacks. And, he's just going to continue to be peppered with targets. And I feel like, I know I said that we're not going to really get into that, and I just went into it, but that's where we're at with A-Rob. And yeah, Clyde, I mean, I like Clyde a lot. He is my RB 1A, 1B as well too, with Jonathan Taylor. And I would take him ahead of Dobbins just because I believe in his talent. I believed in it before draft as well too, in terms, and plus the the receiving upside as well too. I think he has a very nice profile with that first round draft capital too. Do you have any thoughts on either one of those two players?
In terms of Robinson or Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
Anything.
I mean, Robinson in the Mike Evans mold, right? It's so funny because Mitchell Trubisky was of the guys that qualified last year was the worst in terms of yards per attempt. And you just look at what Allen Robinson did. He is the definition of quarterback proof, right? It has not mattered. Getting back to college, right? It has not mattered in terms of another top 10 finish. yeah, you know. But that was when Christian Hackenberg was thought to be good. So
no, I guess who not by true Penn State.
Yeah. By big media.
Yes.
But I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I think that maybe the best quarterback he's ever played with is Chad Henne, right? Is that I think Chad Henne was there for a little while as the backup in Jacksonville. Like that might be the best quarterback he's played with, which is an incredible statement. But again, it hasn't mattered. And that's one of the really important things I think too, is that situation doesn't much matter. What we're really looking for is volume. And how do you create a lot of volume? It's being dominant, right? And he's dominant. I mean, he was in terms of just play last year, one of the top 5, if not higher, wide receivers in the NFL last year. He was just dominant. And so, just that creates the volume, and I don't really care who's throwing the ball as long as you can get those targets. It doesn't really much matter. And he has shown that. So that's with him. And again, the Edwards-Helaire thing, you only get the opportunity to take him at 501 probably in this setting. So I'll do that. And, again, but if I was in a situation where it was a rookie draft or something, and I was deciding between him or Akers or him or Dobbins, right? I think that's a clear trade down opportunity, and you can afford to move down a couple picks to do that.
Right. Yeah, that's always a part of these mock drafts that we never really talk about, is the trading up or the trading down within tiers and with all of your picks and stuff. I should try to find a way to try to incorporate at least talking about it more. Because I feel like that's something that a lot of people aren't very comfortable with. And because you never truly know, like if you're moving up, would you have had the opportunity to still take a player similarly at your pick? Or, if you move down, do you miss out on a wide range of players that you thought were going to be there? That whole thing. I think a lot of people still aren't very, myself included, which is why I'm saying this, that trading during a draft isn't as easy as just trading players after the fact. But if you're good at it, then you can take advantage of it way more often than, just anyway. I don't like trading.
I totally agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. One of the things I've done over on my Patreon site was try to solve that problem, which was really tough in terms of trying to figure out what startup draft picks are worth. So I actually went through and compiled hundreds of trades in terms of what they were worth in trades, and actually got down to a calculator. So I actually have a calculator on my Patreon site that'll tell you, what picks are worth. Sort of, you can put, what's 102 worth, from trying to trade it, what type of package is right. It's good for a couple of reasons. A, it tells you, what's the type of value that's appropriate to get back, and what's not going to be an offensive offer to somebody, right? Because it's based on real drafts. It's really tough to make those trades in a vacuum because you don't know the players, but it gives you a pretty good idea historically, what's appropriate and what's fair.
Right. Yeah, I like that a lot. So go check out, if you want to start up Trade Calculator, Analytics of Dynasty, Jordan McNamara's Patreon account, to go hit that up. That's awesome. So we're just gonna move on here. 6-12 and 7-01 here at the 6-7 turn. The rest of the fifth went Debo, Daniel Jones, Aaron Rodgers, Kenyon Drake, Matt Ryan, J.K. Dobbins, Jared Goff, Cam Akers, Devin Singletary, Tua, and Calvin Ridley. And then through the sixth round went Le'Veon, Gurley, Tyler Lockett, Kerryon Johnson, Marlon Mack, Mark Andrews, and Evan Ingram, CeeDee Lamb, James Conner, Jerry Jeudy, and DJ Chark. So 6-7 turn, we've had a pretty balanced approach so far. No tight ends yet, but we're at 1-2-2 in terms of the positions. So looking at the players available, Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold, Drew Lock, Jimmy G, Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, Justin Herbert, Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Brees is there as well, Newton, Tom Brady at quarterback. Running backs are Kareem Hunt, Chris Carson, Keyshawn Vaughn, David Johnson, Darius Guice, Sony Michel, Philip Lindsay, Raheem Mostert, Mark Ingram's there as well too. And then we get into a bunch of these backups. Wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, Jalen Reagor, Robert Woods, Tyler Boyd, Justin Jefferson, Jarvis Landry, Parker, Hollywood, Gallup, bunch of those guys. And for the tight end position, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, TJ Hawkinson, Darren Waller, Noah Fant, Dallas Goedert, Higbee, Hooper is the top 7 or 8 tight ends there. So at the 6-7 turn here, we're continuing to build this one out. What are we hitting here in these middle rounds?
See, this is a good example of the fact that now I have Mahomes in pocket. I don't feel rushed to get a quarterback, right? This is sort of the advantage that I have. And if you flip that around in hindsight, would I rather go quarterback here? Right. See, that's the debate, right? Because historically, the difference between running a quarterback in the second round and a quarterback in the 7th round in Superflex is negligible. Right? There's not much of a difference there historically. So when you know that, you can sort of wait, right? And so Stafford and Cousins would be prime targets of that in this example. Can you go back to running backs for a second? I didn't catch everyone that was there. I want to go running back just to fade the quarterback to see what happens. But there's not really anyone. There's not anyone there. Is Reagor gone?
No, he should still be there.
Okay. All right. I'll take. What I'll do is I'll take Matthew Stafford and Jalen Reagor.
All right. I saw Matthew Stafford, and then I read the rest of the quarterbacks. I was like, oh, gross. I'd probably go Stafford.
Yeah. Stafford's a good example of. He's a player that I is chronically undervalued, and it's really, in terms of what I look at, he checks a ton of boxes in terms of quarterbacks, success going forward, those types of things. So yeah, I'm big, and good thing I went quarterback there because everyone basically went. So that was a good decision.
That was a really good decision there because everybody's trying to grab up on their quarterback 2 or possibly 3. So yeah, you started the QB run, which means, oh man, the tight ends really went as well too, but I think you're all right with that. So we have a lot of value here coming back at the 8-9 turn. Jalen Reagor, that one's interesting to me because I feel like, first of all, I don't think I've ever seen him go this high. So I don't know if the calculator, the algorithm in the computer is kind of getting a little bit more wise to what actual ADP is doing, because I've seen him down more in the 9-10 range. But Jalen Reagor as your wide receiver 3, although even though he's not really going to be starting for you, I don't think on a week-to-week basis. What was your overall thinking on just grabbing him versus, I think, some of the other. I think Kareem Hunt is a really interesting case to be made there at 701 that people would have went for, especially whenever you have Miles Sanders and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who are both super talented, but they both kind of come with risks just in general. And Hunt might also have been the last or running back with a solid opportunity. I think a lot of people are expecting Darius Geis to not really do much, and even if he does, well, then he's probably just going to get hurt again. Damian Williams, what kind of opportunity does he have? Bunch of other running backs don't really have. I mean, David Johnson's fine, but he's like 59 years old. Keyshawn Vaughn, we're not really sure. Sony, we know what he is. Just a lot of these other guys are either old or they don't have a workload. So I'm just kind of curious on the Rager pick there versus going with a more solidified running back like Kareem Hunt or even Chris Carson, really, and just your overall strategy there.
Yeah, Jalen Rager's my wide receiver 1 in this class. I have had him going. What did I take him? 701. So that would be right. That was at 701.
Yeah.
So we're talking, what's that? 73 overall. I've had him going at 75.6 in terms of real draft position after the NFL draft. So that's right in line with where his value is. And I've got him at wide receiver 1 in this class. So it feels like a little bit of value to me in terms of taking him. I'm not really in on Chris Carson, just from a pedigree perspective. It's longevity out of his pedigree is pretty rare. You got the injury, you got the contract situation. I mean, all of those things are pretty cautionary to me. And when you can take a wide receiver who I think is Brandon Cooks 2.0 at this cost, I think you got to do it. The other one, Kareem Hunt is an interesting player. I think there's other players in this range that have similar, if not higher, upside than him from a pure upside perspective. I don't think that the transition to Kevin Stefanski's offense helps him. And this is maybe an argument for Nick Chubb as well, yes. Which is people have, I guess the argument against Nick Chubb, as I understand it, and I'm not trying to project, but as the best I understand the argument against Nick Chubb is essentially that Kareem Hunt came in and took just this massive receiving workload last year, where when he got back, it was week 9. It was the second half of the season where that ended up being with buys, week 9, week 10, something like that.
Yeah.
He they basically did 75-25, right? So Nick Chubb had about 75% of the carries to Kareem Hunt's 25% of the carries, and Kareem Hunt had about 75% of the receptions to Nick Chubb's 25% of receptions. Mm-hmm. I don't think that is going to get. I would be stunned if that stays the same with Hunt's workload because of the scheme change. And you're going. That was, I think, specific to a lot of things that they were doing with him were specific to the scheme that was being used. I think expecting that to stay the same is it's something I'm going to bet against. Just in terms of you getting a different coach, they bring in, they go out and invest in a tight end so that way they can play, 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and 1 running back. Right? Mm-hmm. They're not going to be playing as many 2-back sets and those sorts of things to try and get Kareem Hunt involved. That's what it speaks to me. Right? So. All of that said, I think he's he is a backup plus where he has the potential to be a weekly flex, I would say. But I do think in terms of comparing him to some of the other backups, I think there are guys that offer just as much upside backup wise as him. So to take Rager over him, I think is an easy one for me, sort of looking at it through that lens. You need a lot of things to go right for Kareem Hunt to be a difference maker outside of a Nick Chubb injury. Right. And so that's sort of where and then if you're just betting on a Nick Chubb injury, like you can do that with others at 4, 5, 6, 10 round discounts. Right. So that's sort of how I view it.
Right. Yeah. I like the opportunity cost argument. If Kareem Hunt becomes more of a handcuff than a standalone kind of guy. I think a lot of people see Tevin Coleman back with the Falcons when he was with Devontae Freeman in Kareem Hunt, who, had weeks, but also had more weeks where he wasn't really relevant, didn't help you at all. And so that opportunity cost of passing on, here Kareem Hunt in the 7th round could net you the difference between, Jalen Rager instead and then grabbing a guy like Alexander Madison, like Tony Pollard, like an AJ Dillon, those types of handcuffs who are more true handcuffs, but we know are going to have that opportunity should that injury arise. And I think what's interesting for Kareem Hunt for a lot of people is the potential spike in value next year should he sign elsewhere, right? Because he is on a 1-year deal. If he signs, say, Pittsburgh lets James Conner walk, and then they bring in Kareem Hunt kind of on a deal that they would have gave James Conner potentially. That would be a huge spike in value, and I think there's not a lot of teams that he could go to where it would spike like that. But, Pittsburgh kind of comes to mind, potentially maybe like Houston, if David Johnson were to fall off or something like that. There are a couple teams, but I think that's kind of where a lot of people in the Dynasty community really like Kareem Hunt for 2021 as a standalone guy with potential this year, but then also to really spike in value next year. And I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think that's kind of where a lot of people are with Kareem Hunt right now.
Yeah, I'm just not. I don't know. Again, you're betting on aging running, basically a year of age to make a running back more valuable, right, which is an uncommon thing for it to have happen in their 20s. Not that it doesn't, but and this might be a unique situation, but that's historically been particularly valuable. And again, what's the difference? How high can he really go? Right. Mm-hmm. You're going to have him behind a stack of developed guys, behind a bunch of guys probably from this class just on an age base. Right. So what's he end up? He's been good in his career, but basically frittered away 2 years. I mean, and running back age, that's a lot of time. I mean, he's wasted a lot of time in his prime doing things other than playing football. Right. So, that turns into being, okay, yeah, he's a free agent. He's on the street. Well, what's that do to his value? I don't know. Does he go up, 15, 20 picks? Maybe, but I don't think he becomes like a second or third round startup pick. I have a hard time seeing, that uptick. And I think there's a lot of just from he's already been in trouble this offseason with a brush-in with the law again. I think it was a traffic ticket or something or whatever. But if he can't keep himself out of trouble, it shows he's not taking it particularly seriously. So, do I really want to make an 18-month bet on someone that I have to worry about every 18 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Especially, like you said, like that next year's class is going to be ridiculous as well too, and we need to find homes for all those guys. Kind of similar to what it was this year, where like Zach Moss is going to have to go somewhere, right? Keyshawn Vaughn's going to have to go somewhere. Same for next year's class. You got all these incoming guys who could have been rookies this year, but then stayed. ETN, Hubbard, Najee Harris, and then you add in Journey Brown and CJ Verdell from Oregon. Like there's a lot of talent next year as well too. And I think teams.
By the way, it's worth noting. It's worth noting for the people that are giving these running backs advice to go back to school. If you're going to be a day 2 pick, come out. Like don't stay. Like go very fast, because again, age helps get to be a higher pet. And what do we see? I think it was 10, 11 guys in the first 2 days of the NFL draft. Like there's plenty of demand for him. So especially in the draft, it's a different conversation for veteran contracts. But don't go back to school, right? If you can come out and you're a running back and you're going to be a day 2 pick, do it and don't think twice.
Yeah, I think Bryce Love is the shining example of why you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, McCaffrey got away with it, but like didn't McCaffrey go back? Maybe it wasn't McCaffrey. Bryce Love definitely didn't pay off, but Nick Chubb, I guess, did go back and
he kind of needed to though.
Yeah, he did. He really rehabilitated his value, in my opinion. So, but generally speaking, I think the younger you are, especially at running back, to get out, do it.
Yeah, Bryce Love. Yeah, I remember I had an argument with somebody on Twitter that year that the guy thought that he was better than Saquon Barkley. So if that says anything about how far his value fell,
right.
Being at least in conversation with Saquon to now being like the 5th string on the Redskins, that's yikes. Anyway, we'll move on here. We got 3 picks left. We're here at the 8-9 turn. The 7th round went Zach Ertz, Chris Carson, Kirk Cousins, Kareem Hunt, Tyler Boyd, Darius Geis, Hunter Henry, Sam Darnold, Terry McLaurin, Ryan Tannehill, and Adam Thielen. And then the 8th round went TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant, Damian Williams, Darren Waller, Jimmy G, Justin Herbert, Drew Lock, Austin Hooper, Dallas Goedert, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady as this nice little tight end and quarterback 8th round here. So at the 8-9 turn, we have a lot of the skill position players that were there last 2 picks as well too. So for quarterbacks, we still have Teddy Bridgewater, Cam is there, Gardner Minshew, Dwayne Haskins, Derek Carr, Phillip Rivers, Big Ben, that kind of runs down the rest of the starters. Running backs, Keyshawn Vaughn, David Johnson, Sony Michel, Philip Lindsay, Raheem Mostert, Zach Moss, Mark Ingram, Alexander Madison, Darrell Henderson, Ronald Jones. Wide receiver, Robert Woods, Justin Jefferson, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker, Marquise Brown, Michael Gallup. A lot of these guys are going to be here because you're going to see a lot of blue starting to come out here, just a heads up. Tyler Higbee, Mike Gesicki, Hayden Hurst, Irv Smith, Jonnu, Ian Thomas, a bunch of these late round guys that a lot of people like at the tight end position. So 8-9, we're almost done here with our first 10 rounds. But what are we looking to do and add to our team right now?
Yeah, in this range, I mean, I really like Jarvis Landry. I would take him ahead of Justin Jefferson, for example. I do like Robert Woods. Brandon Cooks is later on. I'll say this. I think in terms of this was not historically my decision, right? I would go wide receiver here historically. I think this year is unique in the sense that you can figure out wide receiver a little bit later on in ways that you haven't been able to do in recent memory. So I'm going to go running back here. I'll go David Johnson just because I think he presents unique upside at this particular point. In terms of all of these guys, if you were going to take the odds that someone finishes as a top 12, I think he's clearly the guy that has that potential. I'm not saying that's a likely outcome, right? But I'm saying in terms of the guys that if he's healthy, I think he's going to be very good. And if we're just having a conversation about health on some would have been kind of freaky things, right? I'll sort of bet that it's a discount opportunity. I'm going to tempt fate here, and I'm going to go with Alexander Madison because my hope is that A.J. Dillon falls because I think he will. He just went right in front of me.
I'm telling you, dude, these 9-10 rounds are wow. Blue. It's just all blue.
Look at that.
That's what I mean, though. Like I said at the top, like Robert Woods is still there.
Yeah,
but wild. But Damian Harris got taken. So
right.
This is also why I don't like to go a little farther than 10 because you start having all these types of computer picks.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. So we're looking pretty good here, I think, overall, in terms of how your build is. Because, like you said, you can go wide receiver a lot later, and I'm not saying Robert Woods in the 10th round later, but this is kind of where we're at right now. So I mean, this is just all blue right here between our 2 picks, and then Cam Newton and Michael Gallup. So just before you make your final pick here, to speak on the David Johnson pick, that's something that I feel like a lot of people might not agree with, just because he's a very polarizing player in the fantasy community as well too. A lot of people say that he's not good, he's washed up, injuries, all that stuff too. But then there's those other people who are like, he has a fantastic opportunity still in Houston and was a RB1 over the first however many weeks last year with the Cardinals before he got hurt again. So I mean, he has that potential. I think he kind of has a chip on his shoulder as well too, because I think he's hearing people saying that he's not what he once was. And then, there's also that fact that Bill O'Brien needs to justify trading away arguably the best wide receiver in the league for him. So he's going to have the workload. So I'm curious onto the overall pick there in the 8th round, because I don't think his value is going to be sustained. Even if he does well, he's not going to sustain value going into next year.
how can I say this without sounding crazy? I don't really draft for future value, because I think it's very difficult to project. So that comes with the caveat of this late in the draft, right? I think that's a little bit different. Once you get sort of down in here, I think projecting value increases or value to maintain the same, right? Most guys are going to lose value. So I think, so if you're take guys in this range to try and preserve future value, I think it's it's certainly not a predictable strategy is what I would say. So I have and that's a little bit different than my mindset earlier on. I sort of I get into a core as a bigger picture thing to explain the David Johnson thing. I get into a core sense early, and then becomes a tier break where it sort of shifts to me to look into more of a 1 or 2 year window. So that is, and to take some more situational type bets, right? So I don't, and whether that's in start one drafts, it may have been 5 or 6 rounds, and Superflex, maybe it's 8, 7, 8, 9, depending on, where I am in the class and those sorts of things, or the year. And then I sort of take a little bit of a turn, right? And then I say, all right, let's play this next bit, not necessarily as longer term bets, but 12 to 24 months, right? Because if a guy has a long-term projected value, he's probably not going in here. He's probably already gone, right? So you sort of have to change your mindset a little bit in terms of what you're asking for and the outcome that would be a success. So with David Johnson, I think this team has the potential to be a contender as I've built it. Maybe taking Rager and stacking him with David Johnson isn't the most optimized thing, but I do think things can break right for me. So having a guy like David Johnson that can inject, and again, even if it's not right, let's assume he plays 8 games, right? That it's probably not a overwhelming success, but in terms of warp and wins over replacement and a warp, which would be, the true usability of his numbers, right? I'm probably going to capture whatever weeks he has. So all of that said, I think he can have a pretty good impact for me in the next couple of years. And like you said, Bill O'Brien traded who I think is a future Hall of Famer for him. Was there other stuff going on behind the scenes? Maybe, but yeah, I'm pretty confident that he's going to be their guy outside of injury, and that they have, and I don't think this because I have a really high opinion on Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller, but if you don't have a huge thought on Brandon Cooks, and listen, Will Fuller's been hurt, and there's a lot of ways that wide receiving core can go really bad. Who's left standing there if he's healthy? David Johnson, in terms of the target value. So I do think in terms of, I think there's a lot of things that could break well for him. I do think he's a player that's probably not going to be much more expensive than that, much more valuable than this at any point. But if I get in season and he's productive, I can probably cash out for what I paid, So, and this year too, I think there's value in taking guys that sort of what they are, right? Instead of taking a rookie, or instead of taking like Darrell Henderson, at least I know what David Johnson, if David Johnson's good, I know what that means. Whereas like Darrell Henderson, we're not sure. And do we really want to bet on this seems to be the year that we can buy low on guys that young guys that get off to slow starts because they've had no development time, right? And so to have a guy like David Johnson to be on the opposite side of a trade like that, I think makes a lot of sense too.
I like it a lot. I like that explanation that you gave too. And I mean, yeah, like you said, you're going to be able to capture the weeks that David Johnson gives you, right? Because you're going to be starting him every week that he's healthy, more often than not. And I think that's just your overall running back argument. That you make just with having so many running backs is when you should be starting these guys. Like, when you should be starting Alexander Madison is whenever Dalvin Cook's not on the field, right? And we know that Dalvin Cook has a more probable chance of not being on the field for a a stretch of games and weeks than he is not, right? So I think that's why we know what the Madison pick is, and I don't think we'd really need to go into that one a whole bunch, and why I was more curious on.
I can do a full 2 hours on Alexander Madison if we want.
I'm sure you could. I think
I have a whole chapter named after that guy. So yeah,
there you go. That's awesome. So to spare everybody of that, we'll just move on here to our final pick, 10-12. I'm not going to read off all the running backs that went off. And like I said, the only two non-running backs were Cam and Michael Gallup. So that leaves us with still a whole bunch of wide receivers here on the board. Tight ends as well, too, that we have yet to address, but we don't need to if you don't want to. Running backs, Tevin Coleman, Darrington Evans, Joshua Kelly, Anthony McFarland, Chase Edmonds, Latavius Murray, Royce Freeman, Boston Scott. Still a bunch of these handcuffs in here and some good shots in there as well, too, I think that fit your mold. Quarterback still, Teddy Bridgewater, Gardner Minshew, Dwayne Haskins, Big Ben, Derek Carr. Winston's there, Phillip Rivers, Jordan Love, Mitch Trubisky, in terms of like the last remaining starting quarterbacks here. So at the 10-12, what are we looking to close out this 10-round mock draft?
Yeah, just to think of how like Damian Harris is typically like a 16th, 17th, 18th round running back, right? So just when you're doing this mock draft exercise, realize that round compressed, I don't know, let's call it 7 rounds of value of running backs into 2 rounds. Like that's how extreme that was. If I was going to sort of follow suit with that, I'd take Latavius Murray, which would be an interesting debate about that in terms of like, should I do that or not? So that would be an interesting one. Jarvis Landry is probably my pick for wide receiver here, although I'm not going to take him. I'm taking Jameis Winston. And, this broke a little bit different for me in terms of how I would have done it. From an ideal sort of window, with sort of combining David Johnson with Jameis Winston, but take the best player that you can when you can take them is kind of the deal. And listen, if Jameis Winston gets a job back, which I think someone's going to do, whether that's, if he's the Saints starting quarterback 12 months from now, he's worth a lot more than he's worth right now. Right. So, and for profiles, the guys that have thrown for 5,000 yards, it's a list of Hall of Famers plus
Jameis Winston,
and Matthew Stafford, right? Like the level of that achievement is very, very high. And again, I love there. You won't find a bigger Matthew Stafford fan than me outside of Detroit. And Detroit, then again, I might still be the biggest Matthew Stafford fan. So they tend to not like him as much as they should. It's a totally befuddled. But I think Winston's value is really, really interesting in terms of what he could offer. So again, I'm taking a little bit of a discount this year in terms of some odds, probably with Hyde or with how does Clyde Edwards-Helaire come in, right? And how does that fit with Rager and those sorts of things. That it's probably suboptimal in terms of aligning a 1-year window, but I tried to take, again, profiles that I like in there. And I think ultimately, David Johnson's undervalued. So that's really how that all fits in there, value wise.
Nice. Yeah. I love the Jameis Winston thing, because I really think that he's like a 12-month version of what Cam Newton literally just did. And like you said, if he's the Saints quarterback next year, like, holy crap, like he gets Sean Payton, Michael Thomas, maybe Emmanuel Sanders is still there as well too, Alvin Kamara, like that's like the best weapon group that he's potentially ever played with. And last year.
I would agree with that. On top of that too, listen, if you're gonna, I don't do this very often in terms of making these things, but I thought Alvin Kamara, right, in the limited times in my 5 years of playing, I guess almost 10 years of playing Dynasty now, but 5 years of giving advice. One of the only times that I've ever called situation as being like the optimal fit, because I usually don't buy into that argument, was Kamara to the Saints. And I said, sometimes you just, there's select people that you just trust to get it right in specific spots. And Sean Payton, with everything that I saw out of Alvin Kamara coming out of school, Sean Payton's ability to extract that was like the optimal fit of all time in terms of where Alvin Kamara could go. Sean Payton has had the opportunity to watch Jameis Winston a lot in his career. In fact, his entire career, they've been in the same division. Mm-hmm. In terms of familiarity, it's really interesting that he went there, right? In terms of that's the team that takes a shot, right? They get to see him twice a year. They sort of have an idea. They've scouted him. They sort of know what he offers. I think that's a really interesting investment for them to make and what they're saying about what they think about him. Because if right, they would be in a position to know he's not very good, right? Because they've scouted him what twice a year for 5 years, right? And all of that, all of those games. That's not that they take a shot, that they're that smart franchise, that he's the offensive guru in terms of Sean Payton's on the Mount Rushmore people I trust. All of those things make that signing fascinating. So I am a Jameis Winston believer. I do think he has a pretty good shot at being a starter next year if Breeze leaves, specifically in New Orleans, which is a highly valuable opportunity.
Fantastic. Yeah. So just to kind of wrap this thing up, I'm looking at the 10-round core that you've built so far. We got 3 quarterbacks in Mahomes, Stafford, and the Jameis Winston shot. 4 running backs: Miles Sanders, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, David Johnson, and Alexander Mattison. And then you've got a nice stable of wide receivers in Amari, A-Rob, and then Jalen Reagor as your 2020 shot. So if this was an actual startup draft, what would be your overall plan of attack for the remainder, maybe 15 rounds here? You still have to address tight end at some position. I'd imagine you'd like to kind of fill out your running backs a little bit more. Take some of those wide receiver shots as well too. I mean, you would have been on the clock at 11:01 on the next pick. So, but what is your overall kind of like? Would you envision the last half of this draft going for you?
Yeah, I'd have to think really hard about what I would do at 11, because I'm probably, one of my favorite players in all of Dynasty right now is Latavius Murray, just because the cost is pretty reasonable. And the upside that he presents is very, very high in a short sample size. However, that's more of this is a player that's fallen like 8 rounds in startup valuation for virtually no reason over the course of a year, which has been pretty wild. So he would be, but again, that's 14th, 15th, 16th round. But that's sort of what I'm going to be doing here anyways, right? Because those would be the running backs in that. If I don't take him, I'm going to miss out on that entire swath of the position. I would sort of have to think really hard about that. Jarvis Landry make a lot of sense here. If I was going to do tight end, and I have the turn too, so you can use that to your advantage. So, maybe I take a guy like Latavius Murray here or Jarvis Landry, and use one of these turns to stack, whether that's Jared Cook and Rob Gronkowski, for example, or, do something like that to sort of give me a couple of options there. I love Jared Cook as a startup pick, especially later on. He's has plenty of upside. And again, in a year where I'm going to make a pretty good bet that things are going to stay the same, he's a very intriguing bet on sameness in terms of, I think of top 10 guys, there's only been 3 guys in the top 10 the past 3, there's only been, I think it's in the past 3 years, there's only been 3 guys that have finished in the top 10 each of those 3 years. It's either top 10 or top 12, basically been fantasy starters. I think it's top 10, but it's him, Ertz and Kelsey. So, he's been very, very good in terms of him. So that would be a target player that I would take. Thinking about quarterback, depth-wise, I mean, Rivers makes some sense. I think Rivers has sneaky top 12 potential this year, which no one's really talking about. And I mean, he finished his quarterback 15 last year and basically had pretty crummy, variance. So he's basically the anti-Lamar Jackson. So I mean, I think there's plenty of options here, but this one I'd be forced to, this would be in a normal Jordan draft, basically 11 through 18th round. I would probably have selected, of those 20 odd running backs that were just taken in that round, I'd probably select 4 or 5 of them specifically. So it would put me in a much different spot. I would be in on Dylan, in on Pollard, for example, in on Ronald Jones, depending on cost, for example, Darrell Henderson on costs, so those different guys. I think Raheem Mostert falling that far is pretty interesting in terms, the fact that he went within a few picks of, say, Justice Hill, who I think that is the round, right? So, so it's an interesting. I mean, talk about 1 year opportunity. In the David Johnson mold, he's an interesting one as well.
Nice, yeah. I love the overall build. And Jordan, you're somebody that I've been wanting to get on, to talk Dynasty ever since basically before I had you on for the rookie one. So I'm really glad that we had this opportunity to do this. And I know I took you kind of out of your comfort zone a little bit as well too. And I think the computer and its, inaccuracies here and there also did that as well. But overall, I think you did the best of what you could have done in terms of a Jordan draft. So I just want to thank you so much for hopping on, and please let the people know all about, what you do, where they can find you, the analytics of Dynasty as well too, to grab all of your information and stuff on where your strategy and information comes from.
Yeah, you can go find all of my stuff at analyticsdynasty.com. I've got both the 2020 edition and the 2019 edition of the books there. They're for sale. The 2020 edition's $30. The 2019 edition is $20. If you're brand new to Dynasty and are just sort of picking it up and looking for sort of a how-to sort of 101 version of Dynasty, the 2020 edition, the 2019 edition is exactly what you want in terms of, different ideas and those sorts of things. 2020 is a little bit more topical in the sense of it has a different, I think very valuable in terms of strategy, but it's not quite as beginning to end. So, and all the data from the 2019 one's still good, right? It nothing really, I mean, some things change a little bit, but all that data is still good and it's evergreen. So it's meant to be an ever green strategy that never, it's not to pick this specific player. It's pick these types of players and strategy. So you can find all that at analyticsdynasty.com. You can also go over my Patreon site. I'm doing a daily podcast through the beginning of training camp. I did one every day for June, which is so much fun. And then I'm doing one through the beginning of training camp. I'm just looking at specific player values and just breaking down player by player. I'm going to actually there was a handful of strategy things that have come up this week that I'm going to probably do a little series on as well, but I'm doing a podcast today. So it ends up being, 33 a day, 33 cents for a podcast. And that comes with all of my data. So that's my Dynasty tiers, which is a different take on rankings, and my real draft position tracker, which gives you up to the minute player value moves, and my startup draft pick tracker, which gives you, ideas on how to make trades and values and all of those things. So you can find all that at patreon.com/analyticsdynasty. And if you become a Dynasty tier patron, which will get you all the podcasts through the end of the month, I do have a deal over there for the book. So you can sort of use that, get $5 off the book if you become one of those. And then go find me on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty, and you can find the Football Guys Dynasty show that I do with Chad Parsons. We do it every Tuesday night, 9:30, and it usually comes out on Wednesday. You can find that on the Audible Network or the Football Guys podcast feed.
All righty, awesome. Yes, I would encourage everybody to please hit up Jordan on Twitter. Check out his Patreon account as well too. A guy that I know, I've talked to John Hogue as well too. We've kind of both rebranded our Dynasty strategy overall to kind of fit to what you've found and what you've been, kind of strategizing and talking about over the last couple of years. So it's definitely something that I have utilized, and I think a lot of you guys could could definitely do that as well too. As you know, we're still in July, so startups are probably still happening as well too. But especially as we head into 2021 and everything, I think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for all of you guys to grab the strategy from Jordan McNamara. So Jordan, thank you so much. And to everybody who's watching out there, thank you for watching. Please, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for the DLF YouTube channel. Ring that notifications bell to be notified every time we drop a video, like more of these drafting lessons videos, the ADP show with Ryan and Dan, the mailbag show with Chris and Adam. I've got some more versus episodes in the works. I've got some one-offs with some other guests as well too in the works. And we have a new YouTube show that I don't know if by the time that this drops, I don't know if that'll be up yet or not, but it's got Shane Manila and Scott Connor in it as well too, that we've been working on behind the scenes. I know they're ready to get that rolling. So more content coming to you guys' way over the next 2 months before we get into the actual NFL season. Hopefully there is a season. And then we're planning out what we're doing for our in-season content as well too. So a lot of stuff. Subscribe, ring the notifications bell, like this video, and drop a comment down below if you agree or disagree with any of Jordan's picks, or if you want to hit up a question for Jordan or anything like that, please leave a comment down below. So with that all being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys next week with another episode of Drafting Lessons. See ya.